Hi, I'm Elaine Boddy. Welcome to my Podbite, sister podcast of the Foodbod Pod. Not making sourdough today, but making some other bits and pieces for my household. Whilst I'm in the midst of doing these things, I thought that I would have a chat, as I do. So let me tell you what I'm making. I'm currently making some pasta salad, or as I call man salad. It's a salad that I make for my menfolk. Now, whereas I like a salad that may have some cooked and cooled grains in it, some leaves, some fresh herbs, some spices, maybe some pomegranate seeds, maybe some seeds. When it comes to my men, they prefer something else. So that's why I call it man salad. So this has got cooked and cooled pasta and chopped lettuce, which is what I'm doing right now, grated carrot, grated cheese, mayonnaise and yogurt. And we use a mix of the mayonnaise and yogurt just to lighten it a bit, really, so it's not just so heavy on the mayonnaise, but you could just go full mayonnaise. We have done in the past. I'm making a big batch of it so it will sit in the fridge. The boys can help themselves from it as and when they want to during the week. So that's on the go, plus some other things I'm making for my son. So whilst I'm doing this, I thought I would answer a couple of questions that we received. So a big thank you to Emma Gudge, who got in touch and sent a couple of questions for us to answer here on the podcast. So I thought I would do that today whilst I'm chatting to you. So Emma has asked about sourdough loaves. What is the best way to store a loaf? And this is a conversation that I see a lot. This is a question that people bring up a lot in Facebook groups and things like that. And I know it can be challenging. And you know, you have your lovely crusty loaf and you slice into it, and then you think, oh, what do I do with this now to save it and be able to eat it for a few more days? And if you wrap it in a plastic bag, I mean, I have some I've got some, heavy duty plastic bags that I use over and over again, because we don't tend to have plastic bags so much nowadays. If you do that, you'll end up with a soft loaf, yes, but also you soften the crust. And that's fine if you're going to toast it. You could try cotton or linen bags. They are often a good option. But what I can tell you, I had a loaf on the counter, I think for about 5 days, just sitting on the counter on a board, no cover on it. I sliced into it and it was absolutely perfectly fine. It was crusty on the outside, it was soft on the inside, and it was absolutely 100% edible. And you can do the same even with your sliced loaves. So if you've got a loaf that you've sliced into and you don't quite know what to do with it storage wise, all you need to do is just leave it, turn it on its cut side, on its cut face onto the board, and leave it. The only caveat to that is if you live in, say a very humid place, or it's quite humid in your kitchen, that might be the only reason why you would lose a crustiness in your loaf. But other than that, just try leaving it out. I've tested these theories because there's been periods of time when I've had a lot of bread going through my kitchen. So those would be my suggestions, and if you do give them a go or you have any other suggestions, please do let me know. I know sometimes people store their bread actually in their Dutch ovens or their bread bins, which sometimes works. So if you've got anything that's worked particularly well for you, then let me know. The other question that Emma asked was, can you just half the ingredient? What you'll see in my books and on my website is the fact that you can just scale my recipes down very happily, very easily. If you want to take my master recipe and you want to make a smaller version, you can just follow the guidelines. You can follow the recipes I have and the quantities for my baby master loaves. So my baby master loaves use 300 grams of flour, typically 210 grams of water, 30 grams of starter, and salt to taste. And I say typically 210 grams of water because, of course, as always, it depends on the flour that you use. So that is one option, or you can just amend it yourself. As long as you make the same change to all of the ingredients, nothing changes in the recipe. So if you want to halve the quantity, all you will be doing of my master recipe is taking 250 grams of flour, 175 grams of water, 25 grams of starter, and salt of your choice. And you can do it the other way as well. So if you wanted to double it up, triple it up, you can do exactly the same thing. So as long as you apply the same percentage or ratio to all of the ingredients in the recipe, all of the quantities, you can follow the recipe exactly as it is, because you're giving it the same power for the amount of flour and water that you've got. So yes, you can do what you like with it. Basically, you can just scale it up and down as much as you want. And when it comes to dough being frozen, yes, you can do that too. You can freeze it really at any point. I would, if it was me with freezing dough, I would either do it after all of the pulls and folds and before I leave the dough to fully prove, or I would do it the next morning. Once the dough's fully proved, put it into a tight ball, and into a pot of some sort, something that you can put a lid on and get it into the freezer. You might need to make sure you leave a little bit of space in whatever you're going to store it in, because it may still grow just a little bit. So hopefully those are useful answers to the questions, and these are things that I get asked on a regular basis, especially about the scaling things up and down and the storage, and these things, some of it's got to be trial and error because you need to try it in your kitchen when it comes to the storage, but when it comes to the scaling of the dough, it's really, really simple. Once you've got the basics of my master recipe, you can just move it whichever way you want, whether you want to make it bigger or smaller. And if you've got any burning questions, or there's anything that you think, typically you will find the answer. I have the answers to everything in my books and on my website. But if it's a question that you think that would be worth me actually vocalizing and we put out there on the podcast to answer the question, please do feel free to send it in. There are things that I am asked over and over again, which just goes to show that there are questions that people are unsure about. So I've just received an email in my inbox from a lady who has made a starter using wholemeal or whole wheat flour. She's read my information and seen that I recommend using strong white bread flour for a beginner on making a starter. So she's asking me the question of, should I therefore change the flour in my starter? And the answer is, well, no, absolutely not. If you've got a working starter, there's no reason to change the flour unless you want to. My recommendation with starting with strong white bread flour is merely an ideal starting point for a new baker, because it's a simple way of doing things. But if you've already got a starter that you've made with a different flour and it's working, and just leave it as it is. You know, it goes back to that old saying, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. If you want to see what a different flour will do in your starter, maybe split it in half and feed one half with a new flour and see what it will do. But there's no reason to change it completely. If it works, that's all you need it to do. And that goes on to another question actually that I will answer in this episode. Something that I do get a lot of questions from people. A typical question I will get is if somebody is struggling with their dough or their loaves, their immediate assumption is there's something wrong with their starter. And so they'll immediately say to me, right, what's wrong with my starter? I assume it's my starter. And very rarely is it the case, actually. That's why there's a post on my website actually titled, Don't Blame Your Starter. So if somebody comes to me and says, my loaves aren't doing what I want them to do, or my dough isn't doing what I think it should do, what's wrong with my starter? I will immediately go back to them and say, so before I give you an answer, can you tell me, did your dough grow? Because if your dough grows during the proving period, and you've allowed for temperature changes and all sorts, your starter is working fine. There is nothing wrong with your starter. So that is what you need to base it on. If your loaves are not turning out as you want them to, or you think they need tweaking, that's a whole other thing. But it won't be because of your starter. So if you're questioning your starter, as long as your dough grows, and in that instance allow for, if it's been cold or the kind of dough you're making, if it's a slow dough, take all that into account. But as long as your dough grows, your starter is absolutely fine. And far too many starters get heavily maligned when actually there's nothing wrong with them. So that's just me rambling, like I do, in my kitchen, whilst I make my man salad, my pasta salad, and all the other things I'm making for my household for the week. It's a Sunday. This is what I do. I hope you find these tips useful. If you have burning questions of your own or anything that you would like me to share and talk about so someone has a reference point, please do let me know. On that note, I will sign off. I hope you've enjoyed this. I hope it's useful. I hope you've enjoyed our recent full-length episodes as well. If you would like to know more about gluten-free baking, there's a full-length episode that we put out recently. If you would like to know about controlling the temperature, controlling your dough, making batches of dough, those things are all covered in our most recent podcast episodes. So do subscribe, do share, do let us know what you think, and most of all, happy baking, and for me today, happy cooking.